So here are some general political things I want to talk about. There's a trick in Hollywood that I've brought this up before, and a lot of times people don't quite get it. Let me see if I can explain it as clearly as possible. I think it's kind of what Nietzsche called the transvaluation of values. When Hollywood makes its left-wing propaganda, it's very hard to make left-wing propaganda because everything leftists believe isn't true. And stories have to be true in some way to reach the human heart. And so what Hollywood does when it makes good left-wing propaganda is they tell true stories, but they put the wrong people in the wrong roles, okay? The best example for this is V is for Vendetta, if you've ever seen this. It's a story of oppression. It's a kind of a science fiction-y, futuristic comic book story of oppression. But in the oppression, it's Parliament, because it takes place in England, it's Parliament and Christianity that are the oppressors, and Islamists and anarchists are the freedom fighters. Now, in real life, it's kind of the other way around. I mean, Parliament may be good and bad, but it's the mother of parliaments. It's the mother of modern free governance. That's what Parliament actually is in truth. And Christianity is the only reason anybody believes in freedom anywhere. Judeo-Christianity, I should say. But still, it is through Christianity that anybody believes in freedom. But what they do in V for Vendetta is they make Islamism a beautiful, wonderful religion that wouldn't hunt down a gay man ever. There's a gay guy who says, I can appreciate the beauty of the Quran without believing in it. And you think, yeah, you can until they find you, and then you're in trouble. And I'm not picking, I don't mean to pick on normal, everyday, pious, religious people. That's none of my business, okay? What I'm talking about is in the time that V for Vendetta was made, it was not Christians who were the problem. It was not Parliament in the West that was a problem. It was, in fact, Islamists and anarchists who were the problem. And yet they're the heroes of V for Vendetta. So they told a true story because oppression is bad and freedom is good, but they put the wrong people in the wrong places. They did this also in the American version of House of Cards. The Democrats were always cutting taxes and worrying about people's freedom. That's the Democrats for you, right? As if, the values were right. They knew what was good and what was bad, but they had the Democrats do the good things instead of the way it is in real life. So they do this with Israel. The left, they keep saying Israel is an apartheid state. I've never heard a single news person challenge that. In fact, Newsbusters put together a supercut of the media backing the terrorists over the years. Here's just a sample, cut one.
This morning, a top former Israeli general went on national radio in Israel to say there has been absolute apartheid in the occupied West Bank for the past 57 years, and even compared the situation there with Nazi Germany.
Palestinians are looking around and thinking, who is going ever to protect us?
Hamas is seeing a wave of popularity after this latest round of violence, presenting itself as the sole defenders of the Palestinian people.
Farah never supported Hamas before, but does now.
Violence comes from despair.
In Gaza, many see these attacks as justified.
Many Palestinians believe dancing with death is the only way to show their desperation.
Politicians think they can just ignore the context in which all of this is happening, the fact that Israel is an occupying power.
When you have mandatory conscription and service in Israel, effectively the Palestinians will say it's war against everyone because everyone's a soldier.
You could hear it in there, when they say the Jews are the Jews are the Nazis, When you come to think of it, isn't really the people who are being gassed the bad guys. Israel is not an apartheid state. That's a lie. In Israel, a Muslim can become a member of parliament and has over 100 times, the Knesset, they call it. That's happened more than 100 times. There's been more than a Muslim on the Supreme Court, Muslim beauty queens. When you're in Israel and it's time for Muslim prayers, all around you, you see Muslims put down their prayer mats and pray in peace without being, hassled or attacked in any way. When you compare that to the way Jews and Christians are treated in, for instance, Iran, where they're clinging to life and they're so poor they can't escape, but they're persecuted all the time and their lives are not worth a nickel, that's an apartheid state. What people mean when they throw that word around is that Israel, in those areas that it has occupied, been forced to occupy, after Arab aggression made it necessary for their safety and survival, they have occupied places. Life for the locals in those places is hard. Now, whose fault that is a fair issue to discuss, but I'm not quite sure that it's actually Israel. I'm not sure that if, in fact, the people there wanted to build a better life, they couldn't do it, or that Israel would stop them from doing it. But still, even now, with Israel attacking Gaza, it's the Egyptians who reportedly won't let the civilians escape. The Israelis aren't trying to kill them. The point I'm making is that if you want to look for apartheid, right? If you want to look for apartheid, you look in the Arab world, you will see something much, much more like apartheid. If you mean the occupied territories that Israel had to take, just remember this. If you think that that's apartheid there, just remember this. Israel gave Gaza back to the Palestinians, gave it back to the Palestinians, and what did they do? They turned it into a fortress from which to attack Israel. That's what they did with it. They didn't build a political entity there that could work. They elected Hamas to lead it, the terrorists to lead it. So, Israel should never, as far as I'm concerned, should never give a pebble back to anybody ever again. If they have to conquer any territory, they should just keep it. Israel is not, in fact, an apartheid state. Now, another thing is, Israel is not a colonial state. This has become a routine assertion on college campuses because college kids are now taught to be stupid and ignorant, and they think colonialism is bad. I don't even think colonialism is so bad, but still, great powers have colonies, right? When you have a colony, what does that mean? Well, this is a French colony. France is powerful. They're so powerful that they have now moved outward and taken over, another country and called it their colony. It works for them. England had colonies. We were once England's colonies. Germany had colonies. Who's the colonizer in Israel? The Jews are among the indigenous people of the land, and the only one of those indigenous people who ever had a kingdom and established polity in ancient times. And you can say, well, the ancient Israelites came in and took the land from the Canaanites, but the Comanches took land from the Apaches. The indigenous people fight. All people fight. Indigenous people fight. But the Israelis are not colonists. They are an indigenous people. Whereas, if you look at some of the Arab-occupied lands of Africa, like Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, those are Arab colonies conquered around 600 AD. That's, which, again, I'm not anti-colonialist. If they're running them better, that's fine with me. But in fact, this one tiny little shoebox in the middle of the desert, this country, Israel, is not a colony in any way, shape, or form. And so those are two lies that are routinely spouted by these clowns that just aren't true. They just are not true. And finally, this is not a political dispute. Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran have all pledged the destruction, the extermination of the Jews and the rest of us. Jack Carr, he was on this program once. He's the author of the Terminal List book I just really enjoyed. He was a Navy SEAL before he started writing, and he put out a post on X saying in the Middle East they have a slogan. On Saturday, we kill the Saturday people, namely the Jews, and on Sunday, we'll kill the Sunday people, namely the Christians. This is a war of conquest and extermination. There's no political bargaining here. There's no, what's the bargaining position? You only kill half of us? You only kill some of our women? You only behead some of our babies? There's no military objective to the kinds of things that they did, right? The news people, because they want to understand this. They don't want to just say, oh, I'm looking at evil. They don't want to say, oh, I'm looking at a representation of the spiritual evil. They keep saying, well, the motive here was to keep Saudi Arabia from participating in the Abraham Accords. Was it? I mean, really? Is that why you cut off the heads of babies? Is that why you do that? Is that, you couldn't think of another way to do it? No, you are, when you desecrate bodies, when you spit on the woman you just raped, that's savagery. The point of that savagery, the act is the motive. You want to be doing that. You want to be doing that thing. The only purpose is terror. It's the destruction of the Jewish state as a prologue to the slaughter of the Jews, both there and here, and the Sunday people come next. And of course, that's not all Muslim people. It's these people. There's no political point here. And one final point about this, one final general political point. During World War II, the Allies firebombed the civilian population of Dresden, Germany, and killed tens of thousands of civilians. And they also nuked the civilian population of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, I've heard people of goodwill debate those actions, and I've heard arguments on both sides. Myself, I think, that's what war is like. I'll get to that in a minute. But you can debate whether you should have dropped a bomb on Hiroshima. You can debate whether you should have firebombed Dresden, given the information you had at the moment. But the debate can't include a justification of the Nazis or the Japanese, who were the aggressors and who were genocidal lunatics at the time. You can't say you can't strike back against them. You can say in the course of striking back against them, you did something wrong, but that's a different argument to make. I am not a neocon, despite what some of these reporters keep saying about me. I went to Afghanistan. I was embedded in Afghanistan, I think it was 2008. And I came back and I said immediately, this war is a mistake. That we should not have gone into Afghanistan. We shouldn't be there. And I don't talk a lot about how much I hate war and how much, as I've grown older, I hate it more and more because it's just virtue signaling. The reason it's virtue signaling, it doesn't matter if I hate war. I hate aging. I hate death. I hate going to the dentist. Some things have to be done, and they're terrible, and they are just awful. There's nothing good about war. It doesn't mean good things can't come out of it, but there's nothing good about war itself, and it doesn't make you moral to suggest impossible moral-sounding ideas that make real-life outcomes worse. Wars have to be fought, and when wars are fought, children, women, civilians get killed as collateral damage. You're not trying to do it. You're trying to get them out, but you can't go into some place that's packed with people like Gaza and not kill civilians. And so these are just some set the record straight comments. There's no apartheid. Israel is not an apartheid state. You cannot make that argument. It's not a colonial state. That's a ridiculous argument. And there's no negotiating with people who want to exterminate anybody. People who want to exterminate a people, a nation. There is no negotiating with those people. That's not a political matter. If you recognize that was as great as it was, like and subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.